Hey everybody, Ben for the Better Podcast, and it's time for some more Kings of War, but it's a big one, this one. This is about building army lists. So one of the big changes that we've known has coming for Kings of War 4th is how armies are going to be put together, which units are going to be in there, what factions are going to be gone, what factions are going to get rolled in with others, what units are going to be okay. A lot of that has just been revealed. So if you're kind of thinking, how's Kings of War going to work moving forward? They've popped out quite a chunky article. So I think we should just dive in. All right, so over on the Kings of War site, we've got 4th edition Building Armies. Enhance. There we go. Let's zoom in a bit. No, zoom it out a bit. There we go. Okay, so by Matt Gilbert. So this is not Alessio, this is Matt. So building an army for any war game can be an incredibly fun process. For many people, it's absolutely key to the whole hobby experience, especially when you're combining it with purchase planning. I fondly remember poring over miniature catalogues and army books as a kid and adult, imagining the lists and armies I could make and highlighting and ticking and circling all the things I wanted to buy. I still have a lot of those old catalogues, and they now make my eyes funny from looking at all the colours and scribbles. Army building in Mantic's other games, especially the Warpath universe, has found a great place, and we wanted to look again at Kings of War to make it more intuitive. Taking what we've learnt, we began working to make the list building experience cleaner, clearer, especially for new players, and help balance armies better. Not an easy task by any means, but we think we've managed it. Units are now categorized into one of the following: core, auxiliary, specialist, support, or commanders. And commanders are either champions or warlords. Warhammer parlance, commanders as characters, champions are heroes, warlords are lords. That's kind of how they're doing it, and we've already seen this from the article earlier this week where they were looking at orders and how warlords are just better at issuing orders. So having a warlord is pretty useful if you want to use those special powers, which is quite cool. It's very thematic actually. Right, so building battalions, and we've got a graphic here. So let's read through it, and then I think we can convert it into slightly plainer speech, actually. So, you build armies as battalions. Each battalion has a minimum and maximum arrangement of units it can have. Simple. Okay, so what does that actually mean in practice? Each battalion, you must start by taking 2 core units and 1 commander unit. Core and auxiliary are unlimited within a battalion, but all the rest follow the rule of 4. You can take a maximum of 4 specialists, 4 support, and 4 commanders, one of which in each battalion can be a warlord. Depending on your game size, you may want another battalion, not a problem, but you must take at least 4 core units in each battalion before you can start a new one. Okay, that's cool to know. Okay, that's absolutely fine. So some units unlock others. Each core unit allows you to take 1 auxiliary and 1 specialist unit. Each pair of core and or specialist units unlocks a support unit and another commander. And that's pretty much it. So now we've got this graphic here, which I tell you what, we'll just boop. Can we boop? We'll boop over here and zoom in a little bit because it kind of explains it. So auxiliary don't count for anything. Specialist and core, they total up, and support units can have 1 support unit for every 2 core or specialist. The best way I've kind of processed this is you've got to have 2 core units no matter what else happens. And then you can't have more auxiliary. Separately, you cannot have more specialists than core units. So if you want 4 specialist units, you've got to have 4 core units. If you want 3 specialist units, you've got to have 3 core units. And because of that, if you've got 3 core units, you can have up to 3 auxiliary units. So auxiliary cannot be more than your core. Specialists cannot be more than your core or 4, whichever is higher. And then when it comes to support, support cannot be more than 4 or more than half the units you've already got that are core or specialist. That is it. And then commanders are 1 to 4, and I think 1 for each every pair of core or specialist units. I don't know if that still counts for them. So basically you want to start by taking core, and if you want auxiliary, you can't have more than core units. If you want specialists, you can't have more than you have core units. And then supports, you can't have more than half. Yeah, so for every core or specialist totaled, you get 1 support unit slot. That's the only one I kind of struggle to kind of pass in a better way. Let's check about commanders actually, because that's an interesting one. Each pair of core or specialist units unlocks a support and another commander. Okay, fair enough. So for every 2 core or specialists, you get an extra commander and an extra support slot. it's not the most complicated, and the great thing is, and I wholeheartedly recommend using the Mantic Companion, because we've done this for Epic Warpath lists, and the Mantic Companion just makes it far, far easier. It just tells you what you've done and when you've done something wrong. So, yes, love an app that does that. All right, to add flavor, some commanders. This is the cool bit. So that's the basic bit. And what on earth is going on here? Doodle-doodle-doodle-doodle. There you go. Let's just make this a bit more centralized. There you go, and then we can zoom in. So to add flavor, some commanders might change things around, for example, by making a certain core unit, core instead of specialist. This adds another exciting factor when choosing your commanders and how you want to shape your army. It's not, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. The same principle applies to army themes. Now, this is something that I think is quite cool. So, for example, taking Golek Skinflayer in the Abyssal Dwarf list, it unlocks some Ratkin options. In the previous version of the game, some units were irregular and didn't unlock other units. Irregular is not a category anymore, but the principle of restricting units is tackled in 2 additional ways outside of the core structure. Auxiliary units are often the troop size of core units or chaff units. So in the current list for Mantic, you've got like unit choices with a little asterisk, and basically asterisks don't count as being your core part of your force. They're extra ones, and it basically works the same way here, that some of your choices are going to be auxiliary, so they don't count as force building, whereas your specialist and core do count as force building units. There's typically these regiments and hordes to be the core units that can unlock. Some units may also have a limit of numbers, an end limit. This is a limit per battalion, and is reserved for particularly powerful or thematically rare units, or ones people shouldn't be spamming and creating really nasty armies from. We've tried to minimize this as much as possible because the battalion structure and unlocking system should do most of the heavy lifting in this regard. So from playing like Epic Warpath, if you think about core, like your core is going to be your spearmen, your swordsmen, and you know, your core combat units, probably cavalry as well. Your specialist is going to be your elitist, your more elite units, or like some burly ogres or something like that, like a premium unit that, thinking about it in Warhammer Fantasy Battle way, the old way would have been like, here's your core, that's your special units, and your support is going to be your rare. Now the good thing about kind of the way Mantic does it is support tends to be support units, so buffing or vehicles, and in Kings of War, I'm expecting support units to be mostly like Titans and War Machines. I think that's going to be how it goes. Auxiliary is going to be the light units. I wouldn't be surprised if some lists didn't have archers become auxiliary. In some rosters, I think they are anyway. But where shooting's been nerfed, I wouldn't want to see it be potentially double nerfed, but we don't really know how that's working out anyway. So anything that's unique to an army, such as a named hero, gets the U suffix to show that they are unique, and you can only select it once, no matter how many battalions you have. Okay, right, so the way forces are building, you're going to need regiments of core stuff, which is absolutely to be expected. And I don't think that's really news. I think that makes a lot of sense. But regiments and hordes are going to be that, which is actually very important, because if you, like me, are trying to start building up forces to get ready for Kings of War 4th, you're going to want your basic units, and you're going to want regiments of them. And if you want hordes, you can have hordes. Personally, I'm more of a do a regiment and then have 2 regiments, put them together, and then you've got a horde. It gives you more flexibility in that way. But that means you can kind of get a crack in with as many spear goblin units as you like, or whatever you're working on, which is cool. Right, allies and alignments. Allies was a big issue that we talked about before. That was kind of like interesting to see how it's going. Interesting to see how they were going to use allies to replace some of the other mixed armies. The way they're doing the mixed armies is they're using heroes to allow units to be taken, very much like I just talked about with Ratkin Slaves, right? Ratkin Slaves is now gone, but you can take Abyssal Dwarves and take a specific type of heroes, potentially, and that gives you access to basically, I think, probably a battalion of Ratkin. Like that makes sense. So a lot of the lists, we talked about lists the other day, which ones are likely to be gone. It makes a huge amount of sense. But allies are gone. So the alignment system was only ever used, with allies. Something most events did not allow. Including allies of any kind in competitive setting always creates problems for balance. It's the obvious thing. Horrible combinations people will find. Absolutely. This is talked about a lot in OPR as well. In the kind of, you've got a list, and lists have strengths and weaknesses, and by allowing allies you have the strengths, and then you can buff up the weaknesses, so it increases its power creep. It's like Magic the Gathering. You've got standard, it's a smaller format. You open up the format, it gets horrific and miserable. I don't like modern. In this edition, we've decided to remove alignments and any rules for allies. These are much better suited for more narrative games at home or in clubs, and in these circumstances, players are free to make up whatever rules they want for their own games. We shouldn't be creating instructions for that. Okay, how do I feel about this? I think, controversially, this might be a little bit too focused on competitive. Now, hear me out. Allies are great and are very useful for casual players to be able to start additional armies. And I think having allies is so useful in that regard. But I guess there's a really big fix in that just allow it locally. Like if you're doing slow brew, if you're playing stuff, allow 25% allies or something like that, just so that, especially now with the battalions, like you kind of will have, if you're going to take allies, you kind of are going to have to start a small battalion. And I think it's quite a fun thing to do, is like, I want to play a game, I'm starting a high elf army. It would be really cool to be able to run the start of my high elf army with my Battalion army, and now I can kind of get the models I've painted on the table. But I do totally respect that actually from a competitive point of view, it's a bit gribbly and people can't be trusted, I guess, is it's the moral of this story. So army lists, right, this is a chunky wall of text, so buckle up. So the next mammoth task was moving everything into the right categories alongside consolidation of armies and adjusting everything to also make the rules fit. Of course, this started before rules were finalized, and the whole process is very fluid as things change around. I initially started with just the classic units from each army so I could see the wood for the trees and moved things into potential categories to show what the system was capable of and how things would start to take shape. I also poured through stacks of lists from tournaments, making sure they still mostly fit into the new structure. However, I quickly discovered that I'd not communicated to the playtest team that these pre-alpha lists were a starting point to begin fleshing things out, not the final thing. And receive some feedback. Yes, wargamers and betas or alphas can be pretty brutal, again, as they're finding out in the OPR world. Thanks for all the comments, ideas, playtesting, and monumental effort and commitment to many late evenings and Sundays from a small team of dedicated list champions. The army lists are now in a very good place. I think we found a great balance in supporting existing armies and collections, consolidating armies, and retaining flavour and theme. The rulebook contains, this is big, this is something we all need to know, the rulebook contains the standard lists for most armies. These still have tons of options and have the same points formula applied, so are still balanced and competitive. As we roll out the expansion books, the lists will start to get more combos, command orders, and even new faction spells, giving them a few more options. We also have the chance now going forwards to make sure this is cool. We have the chance to make armies more mantic and less generic. So our usual advice still applies. If we haven't released a plastic model range for a faction yet, when we come to do it, it could look very different. Think about what happened with the Twilight Kin. It's an interesting one. Twilight Kin was basically Dark Elves and then got turned into Demon Elves, which I like it. It does create a further barrier to entry, but there's I mean, we talked about this with one of our first videos, like the Venn diagram of classic fantasy, twisted fantasy, and Mantic kind of sit in the middle. It's interesting. There's still some really good ways to play Mantic with generic models, but it is moving further and further away from being a models agnostic game, which is kind of where it started. Here we go. Big news now. The first expansion book, Invasion, has the list for salamanders, halflings, the Trident Realm, and of course the mystery new faction. These are not in the main rulebook as well. But of course everything will be able in the companion, so nobody misses out. Another big shout out to the companion. I am a big fan of it. Right, so salamanders, which we know are going STL, so keep an eye out for that. Potentially November, December time, we're going to get a bunch of models available via the vault to purchase, I assume. Hopefully some will go out to vault members, because that would be cool. That'd be good use of it. Halflings, could see another unit or two. Trident Realm is really cool, because I believe the story arc is that the Trident Realm and the mystery new faction are the ones brawling at the beginning of the story, so that's going to be really interesting. And that book, oh, there's going to be some nuggets in that book. There's going to be some fluff nuggets. I don't want to eat too many of those. At the same time as overhauling the list, we've developed a new points formula adjusted for years of game experience and games played. And for improved internal development of new units and unit changes, this same formula is applied to everything, so everyone can feel comfortable that all armies have been treated the same way. Artifacts. Early on in the process, we reviewed the current range of magical artifacts available. Some were not taken, had the wrong points or whatever, and some became auto-includes, which is boring. With the introduction of command orders and some faction-specific spells too, having too many artifacts on top could prove to be overwhelming and cause design space or player choice clashes. Artifacts have had a refresh as a result, and we've got rid of the splits point value for unit size to simplify things. Of course, new artifacts may appear in the future, as the game develops, and we've added a couple of new ones already. Interesting. All right, so how updates happen. Books go out of print and out of date. We all know that. We take the opportunity to publish some unit updates and expansion books as they roll out, but all changes will certainly be in the companion, which will be updated on a regularly published schedule and will be the master source for the current unit profiles and points. Can we just respect this? The books from Mantic are going to be for the lore, and because as wargamers, who doesn't love a good book, right? But the companion is going to host the rulebook. It's going to host all the units. It's going to host all the rules. So if you're subscribed to the companion, which I was already for Armada and for Epic Warpath, you get all the rules for free. It's not free. It's £3 a month or whatever. I don't know. But the fact it's going to automatically update and just keep everything fresh, keep everything squared away. I never need to have that anxiety as a player of like, I need to get this new book because I need to get the rules for this unit. It's going to be on the companion. You want the new book because you want to support the company and see how the story's going to go. And I think that is a very clever way of doing it. There's no feels bad. If you're not into the lore, don't worry about the lore. The game's good. You're good to go. If you're interested in the lore, you can pick it up and enjoy a book. There will no longer be an annual Clash of Kings book update. They are replaced with the expansion books and the regular companion updates. The big focus of the expansion books is Panathor's evolving narrative. The rulebook, the new rulebook, is going to have the entire globe, not just the bit of Panathor we know. It's going to have the entire globe, which is going to be really interesting. And then the armies within that book, we're getting some adjustments, some new command orders, and maybe a new spell. But don't worry, other armies will still get any required balance updates via the companion as we go along. So I think they said a couple of times a year there's going to be a book, and I assume at that point they will do companion updates as well to keep everything kind of just moving along. And as long as that kind of timeline is known ahead, I think that's a really helpful way of doing it, and a helpful and a really huge thank you here. So finally, I'd like to express my sincere thanks for all the time John Quell, Mike Smith and Simon Brand have put in to shape the list. They dedicated a lot of their evenings and weekends to help and go through everything to make sure it's in fantastic shape. Please give them a round of community applause and a standing ovation. They certainly deserve it. So that's a run through of the armor building changes in 4th edition. I hope you're all looking forward to experimenting and planning new armies, learning new combinations, and of course, planning how to spend your hobby money on some new toys. Yeah, I think that's a big tick. All right, so the big takeaway from this is that the books are going to be really interesting. There's going to be new units, technically in the first book, new armies, but that the core of Kings of War is your regiments and hordes of normal stuff. Which makes sense because Alessio, when he talked about his design here, is like, this is about the clash of units on the table. It's about this spearman unit, this swordsman unit, this cavalry unit doing swordsman, spearman and cavalry unit stuff with archers doing stuff on top, dragons flying around it. So they're kind of really forcing that point. The army list is going to be way more simple in practice. I think it's going to be really good. I just cannot wait to see the armies and just check in the rest of the articles this week. So building armies is today. There's going to be a story tomorrow, and then the video. There's a video here on the 3rd, and looking back and looking forward. That's going to be interesting. I don't think we're going to see the new faction this week. I was really hoping so. We're away next week, so I was hoping we'd have a quiet news week and we'd already know what the new faction was going to be. But it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up, and I think I'm going to go get started on a couple of new armies so that when 4th lands, we're good to go in the studio. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and we'll be back with more wargaming content very soon. Happy gaming.